Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Please take your seat. We're going to start right now. My name is Guido. I'm the head of a space and satellite business unit in EMEA from Amazon Web Services. And with me is Antoine Ronstand, the founder and president of Kairos, a French company that you will hopefully discover this morning. First of all, why we are here. What is the AWS does? The AWS does cloud computing. And what is cloud computing? You can read it on the screen, but it's the on-demand delivery of IT resources and application via the internet with a pay-as-you-go type of approach. And that goes from simple computing, simple processing, storage, networking, databases, down to what we do now, which is data acquisition from Earth observation satellite using the AWS ground station service. And we can actually talk about, we do have a stand down there, E22. If you want to know more, you can come there. But the idea of AWS creating the business unit for aerospace is actually to create workloads that are dedicated to companies that work in this vertical, in this industry. What are the aims? 4 aims that you can see on the screen: reducing cost, data management and global access, interoperability, which is very common as far as communication is concerned, and infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is quite straightforward. You can understand that without going through details. But driving down the cost by only paying for what you use. And again, I'll give you the example of ground station. Ground station is 10 sites around the world that can do X-band reception from Earth observation, low Earth orbit satellites, and that is per minute. It's paid per minute. You use the antenna 10 minutes, you pay 10 minutes. Nothing more, nothing less. No entry fee, no operational cost. That's all there. Managing and transforming data on Earth and in space, and then it's what Antoine will actually show us. The fact that we do have ground stations connected to the cloud are actually reducing the latency down to a minimum. And then it's a common platform, so it doesn't matter what kind of data you have, SAR, optical, multispectral, hyperspectral, infrared, or whatever, you can actually use the cloud to put together all the information and create value for your customers. And then, of course, is the infrastructure, which is the basic of all clouds. Enough. Again, you can come and visit us to the in our stand. I'll let Antoine actually introduce what Kairos does and why it's so peculiar in particular as far as AWS is concerned. Antoine?
Thank you, Guido. So yes, I am Antoine. I'm one of the founders of Kairos, and what we do at Kairos is to create the data that is needed to pilot, to steer the energy transition. When you look at the energy transition at large, there are 4 pillars that needs to be understood, and where data is required, and only space can create the data that is required for decision makers. So the first one, and obviously with what's happening today on the energy supply to Europe because of the war and the sanction is getting extremely relevant, is to monitor in real time the use of natural resources, of energy and natural resources, whether it's minerals or soft commodities like corn or wheat. So to do that, these are very extended operations. They are everywhere in the world, in many countries where there are no regulatory framework for reporting, so only space can create the information to understand the production flows, inventories, and usage of natural resources. So that's the first pillar to understand the energy transition. How many windmills are being created, how many solar farms, how much coal are we still producing? Is it declining, going up? Do we have inventories? What will be the impact of this supply and demand to prices and investments? So it's really using satellite imagery to provide decision makers, whether they are traders or regulators or investors, on natural resources and commodities, in particular energy supply and demand. The second thing that needs to be done is to measure the externalities of using natural resources. It is about land use changes for mines. It's methane and CO2 emission about fossil fuel. It is spills, whether gaseous or liquid spills, for any industrial activity. Again, these are widespread operations everywhere in the globe, and only satellite imagery can give a real-time view of the externalities linked to the use of natural resources by human beings. The third pillar is about biodiversity and carbon sequestration in forestry. We emit a lot of CO2. Some is captured by forestry. We need to increase the natural-based solution of capturing carbon. And again, these are widespread operation in tropical region, and the only way to do that is satellite, in that case more SAR than optical, because of the nature and the cloud cover that we have in this region. So again, by measuring the carbon content and biodiversity through satellite, we can provide decision makers, whether they are states, investors, consumer of carbon credit, a real-time view of the actual sequestration of carbon and the increase in biodiversity. And finally, there is a part of adaptation. There are more and more natural catastrophes, and we need to prepare for floods, for wildfires, for drought. And with the satellite imagery and modeling, we are able to anticipate these natural catastrophes, react when they happen, and limit the impact of these natural catastrophes on our daily life.
Antoine, sorry. You basically are saying that you can track human activity on Earth using your algorithm and your analytics. There are a number of examples that will follow, and so that would be really interesting. What are the 2-3 main elements of what Kairos is doing that the public and the industry is most interested with?
So they are here. So the first one is about, can you anticipate supply crunch and price hikes in commodities? So in the current context, it's quite useful. So this is more for investors and traders. For the consumer, it's more on the right-hand side, which is how can I get indemnized, the claims management for insurance. So if in case of a flooding event, how can I increase the speed for reimbursement of my damages? So the kind of use cases are pretty wide, from consumer to traders. Now, I'll try to make this work. So, but if we look at who we are at Kairos and how we work with AWS, so we are at 150 people. We have been created 6 years ago. We have offices in Houston, New York, London, Paris, Singapore, and Bangalore. And our customers are only very large organizations. So the largest investors, the largest governmental entities, or energy company in the world. Now, what we do, and this is where we are leveraging extensively the AWS infrastructure, is we monitor every day more than 200,000 assets. So it's a mine, it's a port, it's a power plant, and what our customers are looking for, it is daily information on these assets. So the only way to be able to have daily information from space on 200,000 assets is to ingest massive amount of data and to use monitoring satellite from NASA and ESA. We cannot do tasking and pay $1,000 for each asset every day. So 200,000 times 1,000 times 1,000 will be
quite a few. Quite a few.
And the good thing about AWS is that they have already ingested the European Space Agency, the Sentinel data. So we don't have to download everything. We just can crop the few square kilometers that are of interest to us and launch massively parallel computing on the thousands of assets that we are interested in. So the fact that AWS has already native all this imagery and we can compute at scale is really what, how we can leverage this infrastructure in a tremendous way.
Okay. Yeah, some of the examples, I think, it would be interesting to understand where this type of data can really make the difference in terms of the future of sustainability and the future of some of those industries that Kairos is actually monitoring on a daily basis. Please.
Yes, so this is an example of the type of information we use to understand what's happening in industrial asset. If there are sea connection, we will look at AIS, or the transponder of ships, to see when they are coming up. We can use geolocation data from mobile and cars and trucks to look at the traffic on the road. We can use news and tweets to identify potential events like a fire around the facility, because when something happens like that, people will tweet about this event. And obviously, we can use satellite imagery, optical or radar, to see what's happening. So same for to understand what's going on very precisely inside the plant. We can use geolocation information to see how many people are working there. We can count cars to see what is the level of utilization of parking lots, whether it's for consumer or employees or maintenance. So there are, all the thinking behind Kairos is to use all the sensors that are available, SAR, so active radar, passive, optical, multispectral, as well as ground sensors, to understand what's going on in real time in the industrial economic asset that we are tracking. We are also using drones in jurisdictions where you can use drones, when you can fly drones, and this will automatically convert in the height and the volume. The quite important technology is to use 3D reconstruction to to measure heights of stockpiles of iron ore, instance, or coal. I mean, in the current supply crunch that we are, thanks to sanction, it is something that is extremely useful to be able to monitor in real time all the stock of commodities everywhere in the world. Technologies. Next.
So this is really interesting, because by using satellite imagery, they can actually detect the amount of production of a certain type of material using data that is images that are already available. But I think this one on the mine construction is also very interesting, because you can track in quasi real time the evolution of a specific site. That could be mining, that could be an industrial site, that could be building up of tearing down of specific installations.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, in this global supply chain, when a new mine or a new wind farm or a new facility is put online, this will have an impact on supply and demand, on prices. And will have an impact on the economic activity at large. Again, our customers are not defense customers. We are purely commercial. And what they are interested in is the status of economic activity that can be measured from space. And this is where we are playing our role.
And one other element that would be interesting is about carbonization or decarbonization of the planet. And you do have a solution for monitoring that. We see here the maritime environment as well. You want to talk a bit about what you do with satellite data and IS data?
Yeah, so this is about sanction in Iran. So as you may know, ships at sea are mandated by the Maritime Organization to broadcast their position through a transponder, what he calls an AIS. And this transponder is in VHF, so satellite can capture this information and localize ships thanks to that. But in sanctioned regime or in certain states, the ships are switching off their AIS, which is an issue in terms of safety for navigation, but then it means that they are getting off the tracking of commodities flows. And then so what we do is we will use radar imagery from the European Space Agency to identify all the ships at sea and count the ones that have switched off their AIS so that we can quantify the amount of the volume of commodities that are escaping sanctions. So it's a combination, it's always a data fusion again about understanding of what a ship is about, AIS information transponders, and optical and radar imagery to identify ships in the vicinity and identify the ones that are switched off their AIS. So if we go into the next pillar about decarbonation, the first thing that we've done was to really crack the issue of methane emissions. So methane is a second contributor to short-term warming, or almost at the same level as CO2. CO2 is 45%, around 50%, and when methane is around 45% of short-term warming. But until now, it was completely below the radar because methane is very volatile. It goes up very quickly, and you cannot measure methane through ground sensors because methane, which is natural gas, can leak from zillion of potential location around the infrastructure. And so there was no way to measure the man-made emission of methane up to Kairos. Now at Kairos, we've mapped all the assets that are potentially that can potentially leak natural gas, methane, and we've mastered all the satellites, whether they are Sentinel 5P, Sentinel-2, Landsat, Prisma, and airborne sensors, to be able to track in real time to identify, quantify and attribute methane leaks on a global basis. And it's really a game changer in terms of our ability as mankind to reduce our footprint in terms of greenhouse gas emission.
While we're talking about this, I think one peculiarity of Kairos is the fact that having developed in-house all the algorithm that you're using for this detection, do you want to talk about your team and how you built such a talented team here in France and in your other places in UK, USA, India, and the rest?
Yeah, the key thing about what we do at Kairos is a link with universities. So first, we have 100 researchers, of which I think 25 or 30 are PhDs, but on top of that, we have very strong links with the top universities. So in methane, we have a relationship with LSE, the Laboratoire des Sciences du Climat et de l'Environnement here in France, but also with Stanford, with GPL at NASA. So all the key researchers around methane have contributed to a science article that we've published a couple of weeks ago on methane that is a landmark in terms of understanding man-made methane emission. Same for satellite imagery. We work with called Centre Borrelli, which is one of the largest team in satellite imagery treatment. It's 60 people have been doing that forever, which means that thanks to our relationship with universities, we have access to the best of science, and our role is to implement extremely fast the best of science around environment and imagery treatment. So that's we really accelerate what researcher can invent. We put that together. We industrialize this algorithm thanks to our database of ground truth, and then we can move it at scale. And that's really this relationship, having ground truth, ability to scale up computing with AWS, plus access to university, that kind of creates the magic of Kairos.
Okay. Maybe if we can go to the deforestation slide, given the fact that we are almost running out of time.
Yeah. One. Again.
Some technical glitches.
Voilà. Okay, so the first thing on deforestation is to measure, to calculate carbon. In that case, we are using a relatively old satellite from ESA, SMOS, which is soil moisture measurement. But what is interesting about vegetation is that it absorbs, it's full of water, and vegetation is water. And the water absorbs the microwave that comes naturally from Earth. And through that, there is a technology that is called vegetation optical depth. And we really measure the amount of carbon that is sequestrated above ground. So it's a direct measurement of carbon that we do on a global basis. You see Ivory Coast, and you see the evolution in time. We have 10 years of history. And this information is going to be the basis for states and landowners to be able to monetize their ability to capture carbon. As you know, the voluntary carbon markets are extremely important for the decarbonation agenda. But up to now, to check whether there was decarbonation, you had to send people on the ground, and they were having a tape and measuring the side of the tree, and they were mandated on some locations. So if there was deforestation next door, they could not count that into their calculation. Now, thanks to satellite, we have a complete quantification of the carbon that had been sequestrated by the biomass above ground, which really will completely change the way we can certify the quality of carbon credit. So again, it's satellite imagery that is going to change the market completely because of the trust we are giving to market participants.
And I think what the cloud gives as an opportunity is to rinse and repeat all these monitoring systems into different regions, into different parts of the world. You want to talk a bit about this because it's quite interesting. It's actually the first example that your team gave me a couple of years ago, and it's just amazing to me how much you can track in detail cement production worldwide.
So that's another example. So we'll track cement. Cement is a very heat-intensive, process. So we'll use SWIR, thermal anomaly, to detect. We've mapped all the cement plants in the world. We know where the rotary kilns are, located, and we can track whether they are active or not, thanks to different algorithms, in particular thermal anomaly. So with that, we can track every couple of days the activity of these cement plants and reconstruct the cement production in the country, which itself is a lead indicator of GDP and economic activity. So from a measurement from space of thermal anomaly, you can reconstruct time series that will have an impact on GDP growth, on inflation. So many use cases that can be created just by knowing where the cement plants are, being able to crop all the data, to compute them, transform that into cement production quantity. So, we do the transformation of that, which then goes into different index for decision maker to anticipate economic activity. Now, we are doing that in Russia these days to see the impact of sanctions.
And that's great. From a roadmap and future point of view, what next? What you have up your sleeves that will be put into production, or whatever you can say, of course. Don't want to...
So I think the big thing is the next one is about really environmental risk, physical risk. This is a huge opportunity. Now, I think on the supply and demand of commodities, we've mapped everything. We are adding things, but let's say, we are well established. There are use cases. The new frontier for us is about adaptation of the infrastructure assets to climate change. We know it's happening, unfortunately, and we have to adapt to risk of flooding. We have to adapt to risk of wildfires, of landslide and heat stress. And what we do is, again, through satellite imagery, we are able to, and physical modeling, we can quantify the risk of wildfire, we can quantify the risk of flooding, we can give mitigation opportunities. For instance, wildfires, they are linked to the soil moisture as well as the wind pattern and human activity. The wildfires, they don't happen by chance. They happen because of an HV line or because you have traffic. And if you see that you have a high-risk area, we can give a signal to local authority to stop the roads and to stop human activity in this area to reduce the risk of wildfire. So there is a lot of things that we can learn using space sensors and applying it to our physical world, which is what we do. And the next frontier is really about physical risk, which are unfortunately happening, but I think that we can much better manage by providing this information to key decision makers.
And one element that we were discussing before this event is actually about pollution. So you were telling me about the modeling of cities in terms of pollution detection, and this as well is very interesting in the big team of protecting humans from themselves to a certain extent.
Yes, indeed. So I've shown you the pollution with methane. It's a huge pollution. It's a spill. It's a gaseous spill, but same way we can look at liquid spills on water, on desert, and so I mean there are a lot of things that you can see because with hyperspectral data you can really identify things that you cannot see with your eyes, but that the hyperspectral data plus the AI model that we create on top of that can really detect in real time. So it's I believe that we are just at the beginning of the use of geospatial data in the commercial civilian world. It's a technology that has been used by the military forever. I mean, forever, for a long time. Ourselves, we don't do military work. We do purely commercial. And we see large companies using it now, but in 2 or 3 years it will be mid-market, and in 5 years you will have something on your iPhone that will be using, without you knowing, geospatial information about status of your surrounding to inform you of either potential risk or potential opportunities. So it's really a new era that is happening. We have the ability, thanks to the sensors, thanks to the infrastructure and the analytics firm, to really understand everything that is happening on a global basis in real time. And it's a completely change in the way we can understand our environment. And I really would like to thank AWS for all the money they spent, they've invested in the infrastructure.
Thank you very much. I think we're up to our 30 minutes. Maybe if there is one question from the floor. Yeah, state your name.
Thank you. Andrzej Binkowski, Nordcap, Luxembourg. I was really amazed with the capabilities you developed. I'm interested in edge computing and your cooperation with our gold sponsor. I understand that now you are sending tons of data, raw data, downlinks to Earth. Do you think about the opportunity that may come with edge computing in space? Is it something that you are looking at as an opportunity? Does it make sense? And is your partner also trying to do something about it?
Yes, so we don't do edge computing. We don't do the satellite ourselves. We just use analytics. But the problem in space, you have solar radiation, so I'm not sure you can put much on space. But I will,
No, I think the only reference I can make is to what our CTO Werner Vogel did in the reInvent last November, and he mentioned about cloud computing in space. He actually called it Lunar One region. So I think. It's coming. It's a technology that is coming. There are technical issues to take care of. Space is not a friendly environment, as you may well know. So, but it's going to be there. I mean, we do have computing operation that has been there since the 60s. The International Space Station has an own computer and runs everything there. We will see pretty much interesting new things in the next few months and years, I believe. Thank you for the question. Very appreciated. And thank you very much, Antoine. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Guido.
And thank you for being such a great customer. And thank you, everybody, for being here today.